listening to the Agent Survival Guide podcast, a podcast for today's insurance agents. Informing, educating, empowering, improving the way you do business in an industry that's anything but static. In today's episode, we've got the scoop on what's new in the ACA market for plan year 2025. Ross Baker from HealthSherpa was kind enough to join me for a chat, and we talked about the changes and updates coming to the industry. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for being here today, Ross.
My pleasure, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your role at HealthSherpa? What is your official title?
Absolutely. So I am a senior agency account manager. What that means is I work with some of the larger FMOs and regional GAs, MGAs in the ACA space, really helping them navigate, getting their feedback around our platform and product, what improvements we should be looking to make, what type of enhancements we can make to ultimately make their agents and downline agencies more efficient, have better visibility into their client data, things along those lines. So I work with the agencies that I manage, as well as a number of their downlines. And then internally, I work very closely with HealthSherpa's agent support team and our product engineering, design, and data team.
So that's an interesting mix of technology on one side, but then on the other side, you have that relationship with the different FMOs. Can you tell us a little bit more, just for some of the agents who might be listening that aren't as familiar with the ACA side of things? What exactly is HealthSherpa?
Yeah, that's a great question. So HealthSherpa is actually the largest and fastest growing individual health coverage exchange in the United States. We help agencies and brokers simplify access to health plans for both the federal and, starting soon, state marketplaces. And really, in the simplest form, we're a marketplace where we've got agents on one side that are the demand side, bringing their clients that need to get enrolled in qualified health plans. And then we have the issuers or carriers on the other side that have the health plans that are waiting for people to get enrolled in.
Can you talk a little bit more about, for the agent side of things, how does an agent typically use HealthSherpa? What do they use HealthSherpa for? And maybe talk a little bit about the benefit for agents using HealthSherpa versus maybe another platform.
Sure. So HealthSherpa's core, value prop to agents and agencies is having a centralized location and platform to quote, enroll, and manage your ACA books of business. So if, depending how long people have been in the ACA space, they may remember the days when everything was written through healthcare.gov. The problem with healthcare.gov is it's designed from the ground up to be a consumer enrollment website. When the ACA launched, everybody thought people were just going to go onto healthcare.gov and buy health insurance on their own because it's such a simple product and the application is only 60 pages or whatever it is these days. So
it was a nice pipe dream, I think, but maybe not quite realistic.
Exactly. And so now that the ACA market's a little more mature and developed, we understand that I think last year is about 78% of all enrollments in the entire ACA are driven by agents and brokers. And that number has been going up exponentially the past few years here. HealthSherpa provides that kind of CRM or centralized database to manage all of your ACA clients, see all their statuses, what needs to be done, whether it's, completing binder payments or uploading documents on behalf of your clients, things like that. One of the key advantages to our specific application is we're able through CMS approved changes, we're able to reduce the application page from about, I think it was 57 pages on healthcare.gov down to about 25 pages on HealthSherpa. That's mainly by just hiding unnecessary questions until they become necessary in creating a more dynamic application experience. That cuts the average enrollment time or time to complete an application on HealthSherpa down to about 7.5 minutes, where it's usually more like 20 to 25 minutes on healthcare.gov.
That is quite the difference when you're talking about that level of time, even on the consumer side of things, simplifying it so that you're not going over all of those extraneous questions and things that maybe don't apply to them, that are only going to confuse them more than, simply going through the actual questions that are relevant.
Exactly.
So we talked a little bit about the benefit for agents, kind of what the platform looks like and how everything works on HealthSherpa. One of the things that you had mentioned, you had talked about the fact that HealthSherpa is an enhanced direct enrollment platform. Now, that is versus a direct enrollment platform. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between those two experiences, even a little more to how they've developed from what the original healthcare.gov experience used to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So as private entities started becoming involved with the quoting and shopping experience around healthcare.gov, I believe, I don't have the full history, but being in the industry and in the space, I've seen a lot of this, and direct enrollment entities were kind of the first version of being able to quote and have a shopping experience off of healthcare.gov. So this would be like HealthSherpa. I think Go Health had this version back in the day, some other sites. But you were able to run quotes, look at plans, and do what is typically referred to as a double redirect. These direct enrollment entities were kind of more prevalent and more valuable when double redirect was the only option. Mm-hmm. Which essentially meant that the agent would start the shopping experience on the direct enrollment site. They'd click out to go to healthcare.gov to actually complete the application and process the enrollment. And then depending on the direct enrollment entity, they may or may not be able to click back to that site and pull in the application data. The core difference when EDE was created in 2019 via CMS and some help from some innovative direct enrollment entities, including one of our founders here, EDEs are allowed to host the entire application experience right on their site or their web app. So instead of this kind of clunky, I'm on HealthSherpa, I go to healthcare.gov, do the app, come back. It's I'm on HealthSherpa, I'm quoting, I'm adding a plan to the cart, I'm doing the full application, and then I'm looking at follow-ups and next steps with my client and moving on to the next client. It's a much more seamless, streamlined experience.
Definitely less going back and forth, especially if a client is watching you do that. Okay, why is it going to this site now? Why are we coming back here? There's sometimes a little bit of mistrust involved with navigating away from a site like that, especially for something as important as when you're signing up for health insurance coverage.
Absolutely, yeah. As the agent, you're asking all these highly personal questions and getting all this very personal information to enter. You're kind of like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah. With that, let's kind of move on to talk a little bit about open enrollment. Typically, the dates for open enrollment in those under 65 ACA plans, that begins on November 1st. This year, in addition to disruption in a lot of other places, we also have changes that are coming to the ACA Open Enrollment Period. So can you talk a little bit about some of those changes that are coming and maybe the ones that agents more so need to be apprised of and what's going on and kind of why some of those changes are happening?
Yeah, so as I'm sure everybody has read the Notice of Benefit and Payment Parameters Final Rule for 2024.
It's
Or
captivating
or
reading.
yes, if you have not, what Sarah's referring to is the synchronized open enrollment date. So essentially, while CMS oversees all of the ACA to some extent, and the NBPP impacts all of the ACA, traditionally, states that have their own state-based exchange can have a little leeway in how they operate, when they operate, things like that. This latest round kind of said, well, we want you to at a minimum be open from November 1st to January 15th. And if individual states that operate their own exchange want to expand those dates or have longer OEPs, that's fine, but they're hoping that that's the minimum established OEP dates.
Right. And I know that was always fun trying to keep agents apprised of at least the start date was usually the same, but then you had some that were ending on the 15th, you had some that were ending on the 31st. And then you have to talk about when your coverage is actually going to begin based on when you sign up. There's a little bit of confusion around all of that. You at least have that date range. Hopefully that'll take away some of that confusion. One of the other things that I had noticed as we were going through those changes, the difference now in re-enrollment requirements for clients who have catastrophic coverage. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this one was kind of new to me, but historically, is it correct that catastrophic coverage did not passively renew previously?
I do not think that it did previously.
That would make sense because the new rule is stating that catastrophic coverage will now have a passive renewal for the next plan year into another qualified health plan. And if that client or member is no longer eligible for catastrophic coverage, it's going to put them into a plan with the same carrier at, I believe it's the same network type, but kind of the lowest level coverage. So likely a bronze plan. If you do have a book of business on catastrophic plans, it's something that probably is a relief that you're not having to actively renew all of these clients, but also B, something you want to watch as they're aging out of eligibility for those plans. It's probably a shopping opportunity to get them into a better plan than just the lowest cost bronze.
Right. And I think it makes sense. A lot of the rules and changes that we saw this year and even the past couple of years is really to maintain coverage as much as possible so that people aren't losing coverage, having to go without coverage, or being surprised to find that they're without coverage. Even if notices, things like that have been sent, that seems to be very much so a priority of the administration right now. And that actually leads us very nicely into the next change. This is one that was an SEP that was established through the Inflation Reduction Act. Can you talk a little bit about the federal poverty level SEP extension that passed with our most recent round of legislation?
Absolutely. So the FPL SEP is essentially if any member or household is 150% or below the FPL and eligible to enroll in ACA coverage, they're going to have essentially a year-round SEP. And so when we look at states that have not expanded Medicaid, generally, that's going to be households from the 100 to 150% of the FPL are going to be eligible for this year-round SEP, essentially. And then in Medicaid expanded states, it's usually going to be about 138% to 150% of the FPL will be eligible to A, enroll in ACA, and B, for this FPL SEP that's now been extended in perpetuity and is really just part of the ACA.
Right. Kind of raising the floor from where it previously was.
Yes. I think, when we talk about this year-round SEP, there's There's a number of people that like it, but then there's also somewhat of a valid argument that it's a little excessive and maybe is driving a lot of the unauthorized plan switching that the ACA has seen grow in the past few years here. So I've heard many people equate it to when D-SNPs were first introduced into the Medicare space. They had every single month, and there was a lot of plan switching and brokers fighting over clients. And then they kind of rolled it back step by step to quarterly, and it kind of subsided a lot of that plan switching and arguing over clients and people getting enrolled in a new plan every month, which probably honestly is not what the consumer needs.
No, when you really think about ongoing care, that's the idea, is for a member to go into a plan and really experience care over the course of time rather than switching, on a monthly basis. The idea is for really that switch to be able to be there should something come up, that they're able to get coverage for things they need as their issues come up. But the interesting thing is that with the D-SNP population, you've seen a lot of looking at plan availability and the different lookalike plans. That's something that I remember from last year, that they were trying to cut down on some of the, or what they said were access plans in the ACA, to kind of reduce the amount of plans people had to choose from, because it seemed like it was almost unnavigable on your own versus if you actually had an agent helping you.
Yeah, there's definitely been some work to get more what they call standardized plans, which are actually these plans that from a cost sharing standpoint are exactly the same for each metal tier, but the premium is different depending on how the carrier rates it.
Right.
CMS has introduced some requirements to have more of those standardized plans. I think this year it's 2 per metal tier. That's potentially going to continue to increase as the years progress here as well. Yeah, the goal, like you mentioned, is really to minimize the overload of choice, so to speak, when there's 150, 200 plans available in a given market. So
Right. Choice is great. We are all for choice. But when there are that many that kind of have very negligible differences between them, then it becomes really difficult for a consumer to figure out, what do I actually want to enroll in? What's going to be the plan that's the best fit? Now, when you were talking about the SEP extension, you had mentioned that the thought there was on one side that it would curb some of that unauthorized plan switching. Can you talk about that for a little bit? Because I feel like that's something that we heard a lot about. There were a lot of changes made to the enrollment process as well to kind of cut down on the potential for those fraudulent switches to take place.
yeah, sure. So I think when we talk about unauthorized plan switching is CMS's official term for what a lot of agents will refer to as rogue agents or bad agents stealing their clients. I always think it's important to make a distinguishment here, though, between unauthorized plan switching, which essentially equates to fraud, enrolling somebody without their consent, versus authorized plan switching, which is more of competitiveness between agencies and agents, where agent is actually going out and earning the business, taking the proper compliance steps to document consent and client review, having a needs-based conversation and analysis with that client, in enrolling them in potentially a better plan option. From what we see, the vast majority of the plan switching going on in the ACA was much more the latter, where the actual, what I would call a non-consensual enrollment, is much more in the 1% range across the industry. A lot of it just ends up being agents fighting over, this client is mine, to some extent. But the big thing because of some of the national attention in the media that this gained the ACA, which was not anyone wanted, was this negative attention around unauthorized plan switching. CMS had to act and they had to act quickly. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when they introduced the invalid action error. So this is that CMS change they made. I think it was July 17th or somewhere around there.
I believe it was over the summer.
Yes, I remember because I was on vacation at the Oregon coast and all of
That's
a
how it
sudden
works.
every one of my accounts started calling myself. And essentially what they did was CMS blocked any NPN switches across all EDE platforms without warning, really. To stop unauthorized plan switching, they effectively stopped all plan switching. As most people probably know, right now, the only option if you're trying to change the NPN associated with an application is to engage the client and get them on a three-way call with the marketplace and complete that call. So,
Right. And that leads to some very, I'm sure, interesting conversations if you are needing to have the agent of record on the line with a new agent who is trying to change the plan of someone who the agent of record didn't even realize was potentially shopping for a different plan or any of that. But then that goes back to what you were saying about those authorized plan switches.
exactly. Yeah. So it's, what happened with this system change by CMS is a lot of consumers got locked into a plan or an agent or a plan and an agent that they didn't want to be locked into or didn't even know they had at times. And
Right.
so we've got quality agents that are saying, okay, somebody stole my client in June and now they're locked in and I have to do a three-way call with the marketplace to get my client back, essentially. So there's been a lot of growing pains over the past 2.5 months here. I will say that CMS and HealthSherpa are working on getting a EDE solution on HealthSherpa where instead of doing a three-way call with the marketplace, the agent will engage the consumer via a consumer enrollment link. And we're hoping that there's more news on that in the first half of October here in getting that officially approved by CMS and live on HealthSherpa.
Yeah, that would certainly be nice because I'm sure if you're writing majority ACA business and you need to go through and meet with any of these clients for reviews or anything like that, and you have a bulk of clients that need to switch, that is a lot of phone calls that you're potentially going to have to make in order to get those switches to happen and get that coverage effective date for when the client actually needs it.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of concern already with the marketplace's ability to handle call volume during open enrollment, what renewals are going to look like for agents and agencies with larger books of business,
Mm-hmm.
things along those lines. So,
Right, right. Still sounds like a little bit to work out there, but hopefully you guys will get that figured out and approved, and then that will be something even better to be able to incentivize people towards Health Sherpa for this fall. Is there anything else new or exciting coming to Health Sherpa for plan year 2025?
definitely, I would say one of the most exciting new developments in the space is Georgia is becoming a state-based exchange officially on 11/1. They're going to be, so this past year they were state-based, but using the federal platform or healthcare.gov. So that's where the state does some marketing and operations, but ultimately they still rely on healthcare.gov and the federal systems for enrollment and reconciliation. Georgia Access has actually decided to be the first state-based exchange to be fully integrated with enhanced direct enrollment partners. So Health Sherpa is one of those partners. We're fully integrated with the Georgia state-based marketplace. It's going to be pretty much exactly the same experience that agents have right now when it comes to shopping, quoting, and doing the application. Really, the only difference is that application, when you submit it, is going to go to Georgia Access instead of the federal marketplace. From an agent standpoint, agents do need to do the Georgia Access state-based certification in order to be ready to sell in the state of Georgia. Outside of that, as long as you're licensed and appointed and all the things you generally need to write business in the ACA, you'll be ready to go and write business for Georgia via HealthSherpa.
Well, that's pretty exciting. And that's something that you guys are kind of planning on watching to see how that process goes. Could we see that potentially modeled for other states in the future?
That is the hope. Yes. So when you look at really the high level data around growth in the ACA, probably dating back about the past, when you really dive into the data, you can see that the majority of growth is happening on the FFM. And more specifically, it's happening on the FFM through agent and brokers that are using ED platforms, the majority of which are using HealthSherpa. And when we look at some of the state-based exchange growth, some states are either flat, or in the case of Kentucky, I think a couple years there, they lost membership. But overall, state-based exchanges are more in the single-digit growth where, states like Texas, Georgia, the Carolinas, Florida, they're looking at more than 2x growth over the past 4 years for many of those states. So.
Okay, well, that's exciting to think that not only are we modeling something here that could potentially go to other states, but also that the experience that you are providing for consumers is more effective and is driving more enrollments than other options that individuals have.
Yeah, and like I said, it all comes back to the agents and their needs. I went to an event with Georgia NABIP and Georgia Access earlier this year and had agents in the state of Georgia that were saying, hey, we told the state we have to have HealthSherpa because that's what we use to write ACA. And if you are creating state-based marketplace, you need to allow HealthSherpa to connect because that's just what we use and how we do business. And I know a lot of the larger agencies and organizations that account for a significant amount of enrollments in the ACA are sometimes not participating in all the state-based marketplaces, just like back to what we mentioned earlier with keeping up with the open enrollment dates. Most state-based exchanges have their own state-based certification. There's all these moving pieces to selling in all these different exchanges. Being able to have one unified experience for the agent that ultimately is the one that holds the relationship with the consumer is really the key to, helping maintain that level of growth that we want to see in the ACA.
Right. That's pretty cool that you have agents advocating for use of your platform as they're advocating for their own clients. Very cool to hear about that happening. Is there anything else that you would like to share either about HealthSherpa or really anything about the ACA for this enrollment period?
The only other thing is I'm excited to head out to the Ritter ACA Summit on Tuesday, the 8th of October. I'm not sure when this episode will be out, but hopefully I'll see a lot of agents out there and get to hear their feedback in person.
We are planning for this episode to drop on that date that we'll be able to turn it around in that time frame.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you so much, Ross. I appreciate you coming in and giving us your insight on the changes that are coming up for the ACA enrollment period. And definitely as the industry shapes and changes and possibly other states come on and decide to go the same route that Georgia goes, would love to have you come back and chat about that process and what the future holds for HealthSherpa.
Well, I would love that. And we really appreciate you inviting us on here, Sarah. Thanks to Ritter and your continued partnership. And hope everyone listening has a fantastic OEP. And thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Just want to say thank you again to Ross Baker, Senior Agency Account Manager at HealthSherpa. Really appreciate you coming on the show to chat about the updates coming to the ACA market this year. If you like what you heard in this episode, make sure you're following along with us. We've got more interviews lined up and coming your way soon, in addition to episodes to help you through the fall enrollment season. We will see you next episode. The Agent Survival Guide podcast is a production of Ritter Insurance Marketing, an integrity company. This episode was recorded and produced by me, Sarah Ruppel. Special thanks to our guest, Ross Baker, for the interview. Script proofing by Tina Lamoureux. Podcast design by Urban Rivera. Artwork by Vivian Zhao. Follow along with our show wherever you like to listen.